A few years ago, I was driving alone through northern Arizona during the middle of summer. I'd spent the day shooting photos around Sedona and Flagstaff, and decided instead of getting a hotel, I'd just drive through the night toward Nevada. At first, it was actually kind of peaceful. Windows down, warm desert air, no traffic for miles. Eventually, I turned off onto a smaller highway to save time. That was my first mistake. The farther I drove, the emptier everything became. No gas stations, no lights, no radio stations, just desert. I remember checking my GPS and noticing the next town was still over an hour away. That's when my low fuel light came on. Not ideal, but not panic territory yet. I figured eventually I'd find one of those tiny roadside stations somewhere. About 20 minutes later, I finally saw lights in the distance. Just one gas station sitting by itself off the highway. No town around it. No other buildings. Nothing. Honestly, it looked abandoned, but the open sign was on. I pulled in and immediately noticed there wasn't a single other vehicle there except this older RV parked near the side of the building with no lights on inside. The entire place was dead silent. I got out, stretched a bit, and started pumping gas. That's when I noticed the guy. He was standing beside the building near the ice machines, just watching me. Didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just watching. At first I thought maybe he worked there, but something felt off immediately. His clothes looked dirty, like he'd been traveling for weeks, and I remember noticing he wasn't blinking much at all. I tried doing that awkward, polite nod people do in situations like that. Nothing back. I went inside the station hoping there'd at least be an employee around. But the place was almost empty except for this older woman behind the counter watching a tiny TV. The second I walked in, she looked at me and said, "You heading north?" I told her, yeah. Then she asked, "You traveling alone?" The way she said it made me uncomfortable instantly. Not friendly conversation, uncomfortable. More like she already knew the answer. I grabbed a couple drinks and some snacks while she kept glancing toward the windows. Then quietly, she goes, "Don't stop anywhere tonight." I actually laughed a little because I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. I paid and walked outside, and the guy from beside the building was suddenly nowhere to be seen. That immediately put me on edge. I got back into my car and locked the doors. The second I started pulling away, headlights turned on inside the RV. It slowly pulled out behind me. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. It's a highway. Of course, another vehicle is going the same direction. But after about 15 minutes, the RV was still directly behind me. No passing, no turning off, just sitting there. Same distance the entire time. There were stretches of road where we were literally the only two vehicles visible. I started driving faster. The RV stayed behind me. I slowed down, so did the RV. At that point, I stopped caring whether I sounded paranoid or not, and called my buddy just to stay on the phone with someone. I remember joking around, pretending everything was normal while constantly checking my mirrors. Eventually, I saw a sign for a rest stop ahead and decided I'd test whether this guy was actually following me. At the very last second, I swerved off toward the rest area. The RV followed immediately. That's when my stomach dropped. I pulled into the brightest area I could find near a couple transport trucks and parked. The RV stopped about 6 spots away from me. Didn't shut off, didn't move, just idled there. I sat frozen in my seat, pretending to look at my phone while watching the mirrors. Then the RV door slowly opened. An older guy stepped out. Same guy from the gas station. He looked around the parking lot for a second, then started walking toward my car. Slowly, I immediately threw the car into drive and left the parking lot before he even got halfway across it. The RV tried pulling out after me, but got stuck waiting for a transport truck coming through. I absolutely floored it down the highway. I drove almost 2 straight hours after that without stopping once. No gas, no food, nothing. Eventually, I pulled into a massive truck stop near Vegas just as the sun was starting to come up. And honestly, even now, I still don't know if I was genuinely being followed or if it was all just terrible coincidences mixed with exhaustion and paranoia. But I do know one thing. I never take isolated desert highways at night anymore. In 2017, one of my best friends decided he wanted to move from our small town north of Toronto all the way to Vancouver, British Columbia. My mom already lived out there at the time, so the plan was for him to stay with her until he found an apartment. I figured I'd drive out with him and turn it into a road trip. Another friend wanted in, and then he invited one of his buddies too. We packed absolutely everything my friend owned into this tiny Dodge Dart, while the other 2 guys took a pickup truck with one of those pop-up campers mounted in the bed. We decided to cut through the United States because anyone from Ontario knows the drive across northern Ontario feels never-ending. So we made a trip out of it. Route 66, Antelope Canyon, random roadside attractions, gas stations in the middle of nowhere, every iconic stop we could think of. Honestly, it was perfect. By the time we reached the Grand Canyon, though, it was completely dark out. You couldn't actually see the canyon itself, but the stars were unbelievable. I'd never seen a sky like that before. 0 light pollution. It felt like the entire desert was silent. We figured we'd just sleep there until morning so we could actually see the canyon in daylight. The camper was popped up. We were all getting ready to squeeze in for the night. And then security rolled over and told us we couldn't sleep in the parking lot. So we packed everything back up and left. About 3 miles down the road, there was this tiny gas station glowing in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place that already feels sketchy before you even pull in. That's where the story really starts. We fueled up, grabbed food, and split up for a minute. I stayed in the Dodge Dart with my friend Brandon while the other 2 guys went inside. A few minutes passed. Brandon looked over and said, "What's taking them so long?" He moved the car from the pump and pulled right up near the front entrance so we could see inside better. My passenger window was maybe a sidewalk's width away from the store door. I was completely relaxed at this point, feet hanging out the window, eating questionable gas station chicken nuggets, trying to decide whether or not they were about to ruin my stomach. Then Brandon went inside too. 5 minutes passed. That's when I saw someone walking slowly up the side of the building. The guy was fully masked, not partially covered, fully masked. And this was pre-COVID. Masks weren't even slightly normal at that point. As he got closer to the entrance, he walked literally inches from me. I remember seeing this black object tucked up along his arm, and my brain instantly thought gun. People always talk about fight or flight, like it's some expression. But it's real. Your body decides before your brain does. I jumped from the passenger seat into the driver's seat immediately. And in that moment, every horrible thought hit me at once. What if my friends were already dead inside? What if I was the only one getting away? What would I even say to their parents? I remember gripping the steering wheel thinking I should just drive. But I couldn't leave them. So I jumped out and ran toward the store after him. The guy had just stepped inside when I realized the gun wasn't a gun at all. It was a machete, a huge one, probably 3 feet long. He'd had it hidden up his sleeve or along his forearm, so only the handle was visible when he walked by me. The second I saw it, he pulled it out completely. I started screaming at my friends to run. Go, get the fun out! Everybody bolted. Us, the gas station clerk, everybody. I genuinely thought my friends were about to become fruit ninja in real life. We all sprinted outside and jumped into the vehicles. As we peeled out of the lot, I looked over and saw the gas station attendant jump into a van that had been sitting there, idling the entire time. That's what messed with me afterward. The van had been sitting there way too conveniently. So was that the robber's getaway driver? Or did the clerk panic and steal someone's running vehicle to escape? To this day, I still don't know. The gas station exit forced us into this huge U-turn to get back onto the road, and while we were turning around, the guy with the machete suddenly sprinted across the highway right in front of us. Every car on the road started pulling over. The adrenaline was insane. Everybody was yelling over each other, trying to figure out what just happened. About 10 minutes later, we found a police officer who had someone pulled over in a parking lot. We jumped out and told him everything. He started calling nearby gas stations, trying to see if anybody had reported anything. Nothing. No calls. I remember telling him the clerk had run away too, which might explain why nobody called police immediately. The officer took Brandon's information and mine and told us they'd contact us if anything came from it. We never heard another word. No follow-up. No report, nothing. Every once in a while, I still search online trying to find any mention of it. I never find anything. And honestly, that's the part that still bothers me most. It feels like it happened in some weird pocket of the desert where everything just disappeared afterward. But even now, years later, I still think about that gas station clerk sometimes. I wonder what happened to him. We eventually made it all the way to California after that. And somehow the whole thing turned into one of those we have to commemorate this moments. So the four of us got tiny machete tattoos. Jake and I still have ours. But Brandon and Nick both ended up getting full sleeves later on. So theirs are buried somewhere underneath all the ink now. This isn't your typical spooky story. There's no ghost. No masked man, no creature in the woods. But this is real. And looking back on it now, death was probably closer than either of us realized. In December of 2022, my buddy Ben invited me down to Florida. He works out there a lot during the winter, usually around Jacksonville, and he's a massive Jaguars fan. Any excuse to avoid a Canadian winter, and I'm in. I flew down, we spent a couple weeks there, and eventually decided we'd drive back home to Toronto together right before Christmas. We left around 5 a.m. in his little Volkswagen Jetta and basically drove straight north, only stopping for fuel and the occasional gas station snack. The drive was perfect at first. Sunny states, clear highways, good music, no traffic. We made it all the way to New York City before finally stopping. We grabbed an Airbnb for the night, somehow managed to lock ourselves out almost immediately, and then decided to stay an extra day anyway. We ended up booking another Airbnb over in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is honestly one of my favorite places to stay when visiting NYC. It's cheaper, quieter, and the old industrial parts of the city have this weird historic feeling to them. While we were there, we went to a Jaguars versus Jets game during a full-on snowstorm. At the time, it felt fun, like one of those classic winter sports moments. But meanwhile, the storm that would eventually shut down Buffalo was already starting to form. The next morning, we decided to head back toward Canada. At that point, Ben and I just wanted to get home. Our thinking was simple. If we're going to get snowed in somewhere, it might as well be at home. Huge mistake. The farther north we drove, the worse it got. Snow started coming down harder and harder until visibility became almost nothing. Eventually, we ended up near Akron, New York, a place I'd never even heard of before. That's when the gas light came on. We had no choice but to get off the highway and find the nearest gas station. Ben was driving and honestly doing a great job considering the conditions. But the snow was getting so deep that every time the car slowed down, you could feel it trying to bury itself. Then we finally saw the gas station ahead of us. The second we turned into it, we stopped moving completely. Stuck. The Jetta was front-wheel drive with all-season tires, and all the modern traction control systems were basically making things worse. The wheels wouldn't even spin properly. I jumped out and started pushing while snow blasted across the road sideways. We'd moved maybe 3 feet at a time. Eventually, we got close enough to realize the gas station was closed anyway. That's when things started feeling genuinely bad. New York had already declared a state of emergency. People on the radio were calling it a once-in-a-generation storm. Ben asked if I wanted to try driving. I said yes. We mapped out the nearest hotel, but it was still pretty far away. According to the GPS, we were somewhere on a native reservation at that point. I finally figured out how to fully disable the traction control and just started flooring the car while turning the wheel left and right, trying to get any grip at all. Somehow it worked. The car started moving. Visibility was absolutely zero. I've lived through Canadian winters my entire life, and I have never seen conditions like that. At one point, we got stuck again and both climbed out of the car. The only thing visible through the storm was a sign in the distance that read, "God controls the climate." I remember thinking that had to be some kind of joke. We got back in and kept fighting the car forward inch by inch. I told Ben, "Just look right and tell me if we're still on the road." That was our system. I drove. He watched for the edge of the road. We were basically guessing where the street even was anymore. We thought our system was working. A second later, I looked over and just said, "Oh no." There was a mailbox directly beside us, facing sideways, which meant we weren't on the road anymore. We were fully on somebody's lawn. At that point, we both kind of realized, we're done. There was nowhere to go. No visibility, no plows, nothing. Then somehow, by pure luck, the homeowner came outside. The guy had a full back loader and started clearing his driveway while we dug snow away from the tires. He told us straight up, "You're not going anywhere tonight." He worked for the city and said there were basically no emergency vehicles moving anymore. He let us stay in his driveway, not inside the house, but honestly, we were just grateful someone stopped at all. We called our families to let everyone know we were alive, then settled in for the night inside the car. At some point, I remembered we had a 12-pack buried in the trunk. So naturally, we grabbed a couple beers, opened my laptop, and put a movie on, because there was literally nothing else we could do. Every so often, we'd get out and check the exhaust pipe to make sure snow wasn't blocking it. That part scared me the most afterward. The car needed to stay running for heat, but if the exhaust got blocked while we slept, that could have been it. Outside was completely silent except for the wind. No traffic, no sirens. Nothing. The next morning, the homeowner called a buddy of his who drove one of those giant groomer vehicles, the tank-looking things used at ski hills. We loaded into it and left everything behind in the Jetta. They first brought us to a tiny police station that was completely empty, then eventually over to a fire department where emergency crews were housing stranded people. At first, there were maybe 8 of us there. Then more arrived, and more. Eventually, the place was packed wall to wall with stranded families and travelers. Ben and I gave up our cots for women and kids, so the firefighters gave us some of their extra jackets to use as blankets instead. We stayed there for 3 nights. Christmas Eve finally arrived, and by that point, everybody was exhausted. babies crying constantly, people getting sick. At one point, an elderly woman had a stroke inside the shelter. It was chaos. A group of us eventually decided we were leaving no matter what authorities were recommending. One woman there was also trying to get back into Canada and still had her vehicle, so we made a deal. If she drove us back to our car, she could follow us north. When we finally got back to the house, the homeowner saw us and immediately said, "You're seriously leaving?" He told us only one road had been plowed. Still, before we left, he handed us a full jerry can of fuel and wished us luck. I still think about that level of kindness. The drive afterward felt apocalyptic. Entire roads abandoned, cars buried under 4 to 6 feet of snow, almost no people anywhere. It looked like a ghost town. Eventually, we reached the highway toward Niagara Falls, and I have genuinely never seen anything like it in my life. At one point, the woman following us called saying her car was shaking violently. I realized snow had packed into the wheels, throwing everything off balance, so we pulled over in the freezing cold and cleared them out before continuing. Hours later, we finally crossed back into Canada. We got home around 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And only after getting home did we fully realize how bad the storm actually was. The news was everywhere. Dozens of people had died. Some froze in their cars not far from where we'd been stranded ourselves. Others died outside trying to walk for help. We were unbelievably lucky. A few weeks later, Ben and I sent the guy who helped us a huge care package with Yeti coolers and a handwritten card thanking him for everything he did for us. Honestly, without that guy, I don't know how our story would have ended. Christmas 2022 was definitely one for the books.